Hey guys, okay, so I have some exciting news for you. On the 15th, I'm going to be out at Berkeley speaking at a free speech rally. It's going to be taking place on Martin Luther King Jr. Way. All of the rest of the information will be in the description if you want to show up to that. Some of you may remember this location because it is actually the same spot where there were the famous battles between Antifa and Trump supporters that took place, most memorable of all, Stickman bashing Antifa heads who tried to punch people. And of course, with this rally as well, Antifa have announced that they'll be showing up to show racists that there is no space for bigotry in the Bay. And these aren't just your Canadian Antifa that knock my camera every once in a while or kind of just shove you around a little bit. These are the Berkeley Antifa, the guys that shut down Milo Yiannopoulos, burnt the freaking place, are behind tons of violent attacks. So the normal reaction I get from people when I tell them I'm going down to this event is, why are you doing this, Lauren? You are going to get hurt. You're going to get injured. This is dangerous for you to show up to. Please don't go. And I have to say my normal reaction to that is the exact reason why I'm going to this, is because people are now at a point where they are too afraid to discuss their political ideas in public because they are not just afraid of social repercussions, but because they are afraid of physical repercussions. I don't want to be there. This is not North Korea. This is not Soviet Russia, or at least it shouldn't be. And because the police aren't doing anything right now, it is up to us to defend ourselves and ensure that we still have our free speech and it's not being taken away from us by radicals running around rampant in the street like Antifa. Not only are Trump supporters not going to back down to these threats, but they are going to come back and defend themselves and have an even bigger rally in defense of free speech with even more people there. And it is going to be excellent, and I am so happy to be partaking in it. Now, as much as I would love for this to turn into an argument, a debate with Antifa, where we kind of exchange ideas, unfortunately we're at this point where it's no longer a discussion of should bigotry be allowed, or is it hate speech, or should free speech be allowed in the open exchange of ideas. We're at a point where people have pretty much chosen their sides. So since the election, those with ideological disagreements have stopped bringing signs and shrieking to political events and instead are bringing mace and bats. And it's turned this entire conversation into one about, is free speech acceptable, to, are we justified in using brutal force against ideologies and people's speech? And because of that discussion of, are we allowed to punch Nazis or people with different views than us on the left, the right have been pushed into a corner of having to decide, are we justified in defending ourselves or showing up ready to fight back? And this is a discussion, I gotta say, I did not think we would be having in Canada or America. We're supposed to be civilized here. And also, if you look back before the 2016 election, apart from the occasional race riot, there wasn't too much violence going on at political events at all. But come 2016, 2017, we literally have Trump supporters showing up dressed up as ancient Greek hoplites ready for political gladiator fights with YouTube as our coliseum. We are now over 2 months into Trump's presidency, and this insanity is showing no sign of slowing down in the future. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it was brought up a notch. You look at last Sunday, there were just reports from Phoenix showing far-left protesters armed to the freaking teeth with semi-automatic weapons. They weren't talking to media. In fact, they were giving veiled threats to media for recording them. Luckily, it was found out later that they were in fact carrying BB guns, but you couldn't tell if you were just taking a glance at them. And just think about how moronic these guys are. Because if they were to point one of those things at a Trump supporter who had concealed carry, first of all, I can guarantee that anyone would defend themselves from a gun being pointed at them, and I'm fairly certain that a Trump supporter wouldn't have a BB gun in their concealed carry. The guy who broke this story, Stephen Lemon, finished his article by saying, "In hindsight, it occurs to me that if a left-wing militia and a right-wing militia cross paths at a future demonstration, there very easily could be bloodshed. I get the feeling both sides can rationalize their behavior after the fact, even if it comes down to killing someone." And that is the question at hand right now. How far will people go to stop ideologies they deem as unacceptable or threatening? And as much as it is easy for us to just say that Antifa are doing this because they're the real fascists or because they're idiots, this is a legitimate question. How far should people go to stop ideologies that they deem threatening to their way of life or that they think would lead to the deaths of tons of people? Antifa truly believe that if the right is left unchecked, it will lead to the rise of a new Hitler who will kill millions of people. And people could compare my ideas about immigration and my fears about mass immigration to their fears, but I think when it comes to my opinions on this, when I look at immigration and welfare and birth rate statistics, I can look and say, here is the mathematical exponential growth and the bad stuff that will happen to the economy because of that, rather than a slippery slope. Or look at Pew Research and the radical ideologies people have and say, maybe we shouldn't let too many of these people into the country because they have stated quite publicly that they want to throw gays off roofs. That is not a slippery slope, that is a fact. With Antifa, their fears are more so an exact example of extreme slippery slope fallacy, because they believe that if somebody doesn't even express the ideas of Nazism, but their beliefs can somehow have a road to Nazism, they must be crushed. And that's why you see libertarians, nationalists, and even classical liberals lumped into this group of quote-unquote Nazis, and why even a free speech rally would be targeted by these guys, because free speech allows for the open discourse and discussion of Nazism and therefore must be shut down. Nazism in their minds can only be prevented by extreme actions, and if you only get your news from BuzzFeed or your history lessons from our extremely inadequate education system, you can kind of see where they're coming from. Because if you could prevent Hitler from coming into power back in the 1920s through use of pure brutal force, most ordinary human beings would probably agree that a modicum of violence now is better than millions of people dying later in war. But what confuses me is that if Antifa's goal is to save millions of lives by preventing the rise of extremist ideologies, shouldn't they be focusing on the most prominent ones, not an ideology like Nazism, which has so few followers in America at the moment, so few that they're having to target free speech activists because that is the closest thing they can get to Nazis? You'd think if they wanted to target extreme ideologies, they would be punching themselves, because Anti-Fascist Action was a wing of the German Communist Party. Not to mention, these people are quite open with their hammer and sickle flags, Che Guevara shirts, and Communist Workers Alliance signs at their events. They are literally the closest thing we have now to a large organized group of people openly identifying with a radical ideology that historically killed millions of people. They are not the real fascists. They are real communists. And of course, over the course of the 20th century, it is communist regimes that have led to the most death and destruction, not fascism. And I'd say that most people probably don't know that because of our inadequate education system, but I think calling it inadequate is too much of a compliment. I'd say that maybe piss poor indoctrination center is a little better, or even deliberately deceitful indoctrination center fits better, because the fact that you can have students graduating today with not just neutral opinions of communism, but positive opinions of communism is insane. It is disgusting that kids can grow up without hearing about Pol Pot's killing fields, that they can grow up without hearing about the mass famine in China under Mao Zedong that led to parents literally eating their kids out of mercy for them, or Holodomor in Soviet Ukraine, or the hundreds of thousands killed in Romania, and of course Che Guevara, who is a hero to these liberal protesters, who was a mass murderer of his political opponents. And how about Castro, who Liberal Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, praised, who tens of thousands of people died trying to escape his regime. And then just today, right now, you've got communism in North Korea that has hundreds of thousands being killed in their gulag system.
But Lauren, it wasn't real communism.
Right, okay then. Well, why don't you just keep trying it again and again and again and see how many more millions of people want to die for your crazy experiment? They say the mark of insanity is trying something again and again and again and getting the same result every time, yet expecting a different one. And I have to agree, these communists are insane. Considering all of this, if the logical goal here from the far left is to punch Nazis or shut them down because their ideas could lead to the death and oppression of millions of people, then fine, be like that. Go ahead, punch your Richard Spencers, but at least be consistent. Because if you guys, Antifa, took over the United States or created your own society, historically speaking, it would likely be worse based on the death counts than the fascist ones. The United States under Antifa would not be some sort of hippie democratic socialist republic, but a nation filled with gulags and people disappearing off the streets. And Antifa is already an organized, violent group of individuals bent on destroying all of their political opponents. Contrast that with anyone who sympathizes with fascism or white supremacy today. You don't see Richard Spencer running around beating people up. He just wants to talk about his ethno-state. And fascists on the internet today, that's the only spot you really find them. You don't find them in modern political discourse like you do communists. They're literally just making memes or making anime body pillows of that Russian ambassador Natalia. They aren't using black bloc tactics and shutting down feminist period art seminars. So if y'all with Antifa want to continue with your crazy hero complexes to save us all from political threats, then so be it. But put down your Karl Marx and start the new era of McCarthyism. But I have a feeling that that is not going to happen. And instead, on the 15th, I'm going to be met with a bunch of crazy communists in Che Guevara shirts trying to shut down our free speech event. Which brings me to, what should free speech activists, classical liberals, and Trump supporters do? How do we react and continually fight back against this onslaught from Antifa without causing more violence and extremism? I totally sympathize with the people who come out and say we don't want to cause more conflict, we don't want to look bad for optics in the media, which will just blame and shame all the free speech activists and call them the violent ones if they fight back. But with this dichotomy of violence versus nonviolence, I can't say that Trump supporters are wrong to defend themselves, especially when we're in a situation where the police aren't doing anything. In cases like Berkeley, where you have girls being beat over the head with sticks and no one is jumping in to help them. I can't say that they're wrong to defend themselves. And Antifa go looking to pick fights everywhere they go. You know you can expect them to come up and fight you, so why wouldn't you show up prepared to defend yourself? If you're wearing a mega cap, you're free game to them. It's not a problem if they finish those fights that Antifa starts. That's always been the motto. Don't start the fight, but finish the fight. I think that is perfectly reasonable. Ideally, I wouldn't want any violence to occur at all. But I have to say, as someone who has been accosted by Antifa time and time again, it's a little hilarious to finally see them getting a taste of their own medicine at places like Huntington Beach. And self-preservation is the right of every individual, and I hold that for progressives as well. If a Trump supporter comes at you, you should be allowed to defend yourself. But the unfortunate reality with this going on, with the right finally rising up to defend themselves, is that the right and left are going to start ping-ponging off each other as one strays to either side of the extreme. And in a historical context, this is not sustainable, and the left and the right are going to eventually lose all basis for coexisting, that basis being a conversation and dialogue going on between them. And as that disappears, the brutality of these fights is going to skyrocket. Which is why the end of the discussion around free speech marked the beginning of the discussion around violence. In the Spanish Civil War, the Marxist left and the traditionalist right lost all cohesion after years of competing radicalization, led from isolated street fights, like at kind of the Trump and Hillary events we saw earlier last year, to street brawls like at Huntington Beach, and eventually to assassinations and open warfare. And there is no doubt in my mind that eventually this is going to lead to some sort of unfortunate violent event. And I hope to God that doesn't happen, but it's hard for me to not recognize that this isn't like the 70s. We don't have two fringe groups fighting against each other. We have large portions of society with massive disagreements that are willing to go to radical ends to stop the other side. Regardless of this reality, I refuse to be intimidated by a bunch of hippie, liberal, gender ambiguous art students into not speaking up for free speech. It's just not going to happen, and so many of the people joining me at Berkeley feel the same way, and we won't let them take control of the narrative. We won't let them decide whether or not we can have a rally for free speech. We're going to do it anyways because it is our God-given right. America, F yeah. Anyways, for those of you who can't show up to the rally, I appreciate you all the same and know you would show up if you could. If you want to, follow me on social media, and I'll be making posts about it at Lauren_Southern on Twitter, and I will be posting about the Berkeley rally on my YouTube after the fact as well. I'm sure there will be live streamers there as well that you can follow. Also, feel free to hit like and subscribe because I'm going to have really exciting news coming up on this channel in the next couple of days. So stay tuned for that, and thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you next time.